The Dallas Cowboys are one of the most controversial franchises, if not the most controversial franchise in the NFL. I mean, they fans are delusional. Trust me, I know. They just about hated by every other fan base except maybe, I don't know, the Browns. They got their own issues. And overall, the Cowboys run their team just a tad bit different. Yes, we're talking about you, Jerry. Matter of fact, speaking about Jerry, he has owned the Cowboys since February 25th, 1989. He bought the franchise for $140 million and immediately fired their coach and replaced him with his former teammate from Arkansas, Jimmy Johnson. That goes to show him already showing signs of what's to come. However, this proved to be beneficial as he turned the franchise around and won 3 Super Bowls in the 90s, finally ending the Cowboys' cold streak since 1978 season. This is all fine and dandy, right? Wrong. The Cowboys then went on after the 1996 season to never reach the Super Bowl again. This has led many to believe that they are genuinely cursed. Why has a team with so much talent throughout the years almost gone 30 years without even making it to a Super Bowl? Is it because of black magic, or is there something far more sinister at play? First, let's start from the beginning. If you are watching this, there's probably an 100% chance that you are not subscribed. Please subscribe to the Twin Beams channel. This is just the beginning. If you subscribe, then I can afford to feed all my cats, so please subscribe. And I mean the way beginning, the early years of the Cowboys. So the Cowboys were founded in 1960. They were part of the NFL expansion team in that year. Some guy named Oilman Clint Murchison was the majority owner, and the first year that they were founded, as to be expected, they were kind of ass, only reaching a 0-11 and 1 tie record. And because of them being an expansion team, they faced a lot of issues, especially compared to teams that were already established for years before them. Not to mention, they were the first expansion team since a decade prior to that. So there was no other teams that were kind of on the same boat as them. All the teams were already established by the time that, the Cowboys had first been inaugurated. They had to overcome the challenge of having to only draft from the 1960 college draft and only build a initial roster from unprotected player from existing teams. Kind of like when you do a, expansion team on NBA, you can only pick up the unprotected players that people just kind of leave that they don't really care about too much. So they got a bunch of brown shirts on their team. They began to build a foundation pretty early on, gradually building a competitive team. Key acquisitions during this period included quarterback Don Meredith, defensive end Bob Lilly, linebacker Chuck Howley, and cornerback Mel Renfro. So they, eventually began to kind of settle in and, eventually draft and pick up some players that were pretty competent. They would then go on to have their first winning season in 1966, finishing a 10-3-1 record and winning the Eastern Conference title. So there was actually some hope for this team. After this season, they would have a remarkable run of 20 consecutive winning seasons. And this just, skyrocketed team's market because nobody likes a losing NFL team. And it was actually pretty impressive because only 6 years prior, they had just been inaugurated into the NFL. And then 6 years later, they were able to have 20 winning seasons in a row. They narrowly lost to the Green Bay Packers in the NFL championship game in both 1966 and 1967, the latter being the famous Ice Bowl game. And it's just so hilarious. Like, some things just really don't change, do they? This was actually when they got their first nickname. Their first nickname was not America's Team. It was the nickname Next Year's Champions because of these narrow misses of winning the actual championship game. And it's just so hilarious to me that the Green Bay Packers actually beat them all the way back in the 1960s. Just goes to show, what would happen in future years, even 30 to 40 to 50 years in the future. In 1970, they would have their first Super Bowl appearance, Super Bowl V, where they lost to the Baltimore Colts in a very close game. So yes, Colts fan, you guys used to be actually in Baltimore, and I honestly don't really know how to feel about that. Then between the 1971 to 1978 seasons were when the Cowboys became a national threat to the rest of the NFL and actually became the America's team. They would go on to destroy the Miami Dolphins in a 24-3 victory in Super Bowl VI. And MVP and future starter Roger Staubach would go on to have a generational game. He would go on to pass 12 of 19 passes completing and 119 yards with 2 touchdowns. Other notable players like Chuck Howley, which I spoke of earlier, and Duan Thomas also helped out in getting this dominant win over the Miami Dolphins in Super Bowl 6. This victory helped shed the next year's champion level and establish the Cowboys as a championship franchise. They would then go on to dominate the 1970s, making 5 Super Bowl appearances and winning two, including the Miami Dolphins one in Super Bowl 6 and Super Bowl 12, and the Cowboys knew how to market themselves with their on field success and marketing strategies by general manager Tex Schramm, including hosting Thanksgiving Day games, which still go on today and is a tradition today, led them to be dubbed America's team in 1978 after their victory. Super Bowl 12 was another dominant win, with them defeating the Denver Broncos 27-10, and defensive lineman Randy White and Harvey Martin were named co-Super Bowl MVPs, which I don't know how common co-Super Bowl MVPs are, as well as being a defensive lineman winning that shit. That shit's crazy. Roger Staubach was still the quarterback throwing a touchdown pass, but it was really the two interceptions leading to 10 first quarter points that eventually got them the victory, as well as them closing out games, which they never do nowadays. They would eventually, the next season, also enter the Super Bowl 13, but would lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But as said, these motherfuckers were insane in the 1970s. And I know some unks are still reliving those times of the Cowboys being there every other fucking Sunday in the Super Bowl because this type of shit just doesn't happen. We were basically the Chiefs, what they are now, back in the 70s. It was a hard fought battle, but just getting there and getting there 5 years in a 10-year span is absolutely insane. And winning two of them, it had solidified them as America's team and also solidified them as an absolute dynasty for years to come. The Dallas Cowboys experienced a period of growth and dominance from their founding in 1960 through the 1978 season. After initial struggles, which one could understand, they built a winning team under legendary coach Tom Landry and general manager Tex Schramm that also coined them the America's Team nickname, which is still used to this day. They overcame the next year's champion label with their Super Bowl 6 victory. By the end of the 1978 season, the Cowboys had established themselves as a premier franchise in the NFL, having appeared in 5 Super Bowls. 2 years after that, their star quarterback Roger Staubach actually retired in March 1980. He was obviously inaugurated in the NFL Hall of Fame. He was eventually ranked number 29 in players of all time, the second ranked Cowboy behind Bob Billy that also retired. So a lot of retirements going on. The Cowboys just eventually began to decline in the 1980s because of these key players retiring or just plain out leaving, and the team struggled to maintain its dominance that it had in the 1970s. There was also the strikes going on in 1987 that just caused internal friction and hindered player development. Between those years, the Cowboys missed the playoffs in 3 of those 4 seasons leading up to the 1988 season. Dallas eventually finished the 1988 season with a 3-13 record, the worst in franchise history other than the 1-11 record that they had. I know I spoke of some of these earlier, but notable players throughout the 1970s was Roger Staubach, Bob Lilly, Tony Dorsett, Mel Renfro, Rayfield Wright. And Tony Dorsett did play, or he got Rookie of the Year in 1977, so he did go on to play in the 80s a little bit. But, it didn't really lead to much because of the lack of talent. Well, other than the, Super Bowl victories. Randy White, defensive tackle, Rayfield Wright, or Randy White, Rayfield Wright, Bob Hayes, Cliff Harris, Harvey Martin. If you're like 57 or 62, you know all the players I'm talking about, but I doubt any of you watching know about any of these players, except maybe Roger Staubach if you play Madden, and Tony Dorsett, maybe Bob Hayes. But this lack of success sparked a twinkle in a certain somebody's eyes, and he decided that he wanted to take advantage of this. A certain somebody that saw an opportunity and knew that he was not going to let it go ever. Of course, we're talking about the only Jerry Jones. Now, a little bit on Jerry Jones. He was actually born in California and born in Los Angeles and went on to play football at Arkansas. Arkansas, I don't know how to say that shit. Now, this guy was actually tough at football and was co-captain of the 1964 national championship winning team Razorbacks team. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in business administration in 1965, then earned an MBA MBA from the University of Arkansas in 1970. He then would go on to find or founded Jerry Jones Oil and Gas Co. in 1971, which continues to operate to this day. Then explored other business opportunities, including pizza restaurants and insurance. So this guy had that bag on him. Now, this guy saw an opportunity in a team that had completely droughted. He would go on to buy, like I said earlier, the Cowboys for 140 million in the 1989 season. Jones then made a controversial decision by firing legendary coach Tom Landry, and this is the same Tom Landry that had completely flipped the script for the Cowboys in previous years. And he was the only coach in franchise history. So this guy, he meant a lot to people, but he felt that they needed a change. And then he would go on to replace him with his former teammate, college teammate, Jimmy Johnson. Now this was not a complete 180 turnaround as they went on to finish a 1-15 season in 1989 under their new rule of Jerry Jones and new coaching of Jimmy Johnson. But this seemed like all an elaborate plan by Jimmy Johnson, as he proved adept at building a winning team. He made shrewd draft picks and impactful trades, most notably the trade of Herschel Walker to the Minnesota Vikings, which brought a wealth of draft picks that helped acquire future stars like Emmitt Smith and Derek Woodson. They would also go on to draft a very notable player in Troy Aikman in the 1989 draft. A year prior than that, Michael Irvin went ahead and got drafted in 1988 as well, with Troy Aikman at the quarterback spot and Emmitt Smith at the running back spot, and their star receiver Michael Irving emerging as future and Hall of Famers. This became the team's core known as the triplets, and this same theme has spread onto even late 2020s as Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, and you could say Amari Cooper were kind of like the triplets, as well as Des Bryant those early years. But the Cowboys always seem to have a good core of a quarterback, running back, and a wide receiver. They will go on to improve their record to a 7-9 record in 1990 and reached the playoffs in 1991 with an astounding 11-5 record. They suffered a heartbreaking loss in the playoffs in 1991 and then went on a dominant run, winning the Super Bowl in 1992 and 93 in a row. Super Bowl 27 was a complete domination against the Buffalo Bills, winning 52-17, and Troy Aikman earning the Super Bowl MVP honors after throwing 4 touchdown passes. Super Bowl 28 went as followed against the Bills once again, and they would get their second consecutive title, 30-13. So still a denomination, not quite as much as the early game, but I mean 30-13 in the Super Bowl is absolutely heartbreaking. And this time Emmitt Smith will go ahead and win the Super Bowl MVP after being the reigning NFL MVP, rushing for 2 touchdowns and 132 rushing yards. This was, of course, during the Buffalo Bills' reigning seasons of losing in the Super Bowl 4 times in a row. Then they would go on to win their third Super Bowl in 4 years, 2 years after the last one. They would go on to win Super Bowl 29, I believe, 27-17 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Cornerback Larry Brown would win the Super Bowl MVP after having 2 interceptions in the second half. They would go on to be the first team in history to win 3 Super Bowl in 4 years. And this was also the first loss in Pittsburgh Steelers franchise history. But of course, after this Super Bowl, they would go on to have the longest Super Bowl drought in their team's history. The season following the previous season where they won the Super Bowl turned out to be somewhat of a mixed season as they went 10-6. They did eventually go into the playoffs, but they were upset by the Carolina Panthers. This season is highlighted by Michael Irvin's suspension, as he was suspended for the first 5 games of the 1996 season due to drug-related arrest. There were also some other off-field issues as controversy arose when writer Skip Bayless published a negative account of the 1995 season, and when Irvin and Eric Williams were accused of sexual assault. So the team was completely breaking in from the inside out. Now we move on to post-dynasty transition and them seeking new leadership as they had to go ahead and move along from their coach, Barry Switzer. Players such as Michael Irving and Daron Johnston after the 1999 season would have to see their departure from the Cowboys, and quarterback Troy Aikman later would also have to go as he fell to a lot of injuries and was never quite the same. Running back Emmitt Smith was a bit younger than both of them, so he did go ahead and play up to the 2002 season and becoming an NFL all-time leader in rushing yards, but then would see his departure from that team that same year. After the departure of the head coach, they would see two more head coaches in a short period, as Chan Gailey was the coach from 1998 to 1999, and Dave Campo was the coach from 2000 to 2002. Once you reach the 2000s, and specifically the 2003 season, is when Bill Parcells and Tony Romo would be introduced to the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys brought in veteran head coach Bill Parcells in 2003, hoping he could turn the team back into a championship contender. They would also go ahead and draft Tony Romo in 2003. Romo spent 3 years as a backup before taking over as a starter in Week 7 of the 2006, which is just pretty evident in the Cowboys' history, losing in the wild card. Parcells would leave the team in the 2006 season and was replaced by Wade Phillips. Now, Wade Phillips had a strong run as a head coach, including a 13-3 season in 2007, but the team continued to struggle in the playoffs.
On fourth down, clock running, intercepted. Giants. McCoy.
Then they would have a grueling 9 seasons with Jason Garrett, as Jason Garrett took over as interim head coach midway through the 2010 season and was named the permanent head coach in 2011. Under Garrett, the Cowboys consistently posted winning records and made the playoffs several times, winning the NFC Championship in 2014, 2016, and 2018, respectively. However, they were unable to advance past the divisional round during this period, leaving fans yearning for another championship run. It was absolutely devastating to the fans, and it was just completely disappointing for the players not able to pass the divisional round after having winning season after winning season. After the 2019 season and 9 grueling seasons with Jason Garrett, Jerry Jones thought that if he changed the coach, maybe this time the Cowboys would eventually pass the divisional round and make it to the Super Bowl again. Mike McCarthy, a veteran head coach from Green Bay, would go ahead and sign as the head coach of the Cowboys in 2020. Unfortunately, Mike McCarthy was a lot like Jason Garrett in other ways, not just coaching, because they continued the trend of having regular season success with winning records and playoff berths in multiple seasons. Notable players under Mike McCarthy's coaching would go ahead and blossom, like Dak Prescott, running back Ezekiel Elliott, and linebacker Micah Parsons, as they emerged as NFL stars. But despite the team's talent and regular season performance, the quest for a sixth Super Bowl never quite made it there. Fans are disappointed in quarterback Dak Prescott. A majority of Cowboy fans blame Dak Prescott because of their, playoff successes or lack thereof. Other fans blame coaching and time management because Mike McCarthy really did not know what he was doing out there on the field. I'm convinced he had early dementia, and the lack of consistency in the Cowboys defense also proved to be one of the reasons they couldn't quite make it there. Ezekiel Elliott was incredible from his rookie season, but eventually fizzled out and was not able to reach heights that other running backs in his class or around his class were able to do, such as Saquon Barkley. It's quite saddening that such a bright talent was ruined because of injuries. Dak Prescott has also had a number of injuries affecting records and also playoff runs of the Cowboys, as the Cowboys seem to collapse without their starting quarterback. He had an ankle fracture and dislocation in 2020. October 2020, Prescott suffered a compound fracture and dislocation of his right ankle during Week 5 game against the New York Giants. The season-ending injury required surgery and a lengthy rehabilitation process, and it seems that the Cowboys also need to rehabilitate because they just were not able to continue playing without their starting quarterback. He had a calf strain injury in 2021. Prescott missed one game after suffering a calf strain in his right leg. It was only one game, but his injury prone was just kind of like a scare for the Cowboys, as they felt like every time he went down, the complete season was absolutely ended. He would then go on to miss five games because of a right thumb fracture in 2022. And then his most recent injury, where Cooper Rush went ahead and had to play for him, right hamstring partial avulsion. Prescott injured his right hamstring in a Week 9 game against the Atlanta Falcons in 2024, and this injury, described as a partial avulsion where the hamstring tendon partially pulls away from the bone, required a season-ending surgery in November 2024, which is saddening for the fans. And just every time you see this guy go down, you just never want it to happen because he is such a great guy. All these injuries and all these unfortunate events for the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys also developed a habit since the 2009 season to lose in the playoffs. They would lose in devastating fashion as they lost in the divisional round in the 2009 season, losing to the Minnesota Vikings 3-34. They would also lose in the 2014 season, also losing in the divisional round, losing to the Green Bay Packers once again, as I said earlier, 21-26. And this game was heavily remembered because of the controversial catch that Des Bryant definitely caught, but was ruled incomplete on the field. And come on, if he would have caught that, we definitely would have won the Super Bowl that year. That was supposed to be our year. They would also go ahead and lose in the divisional round once again in the 2016 season, losing to the Green Bay Packers 31-34 in heartbreaking fashion, as this was the first year we saw Dak and Zeke in action, and it was incredible watching Dak Prescott go from a sixth rounder to an NFL star. But Aaron Rodgers just was a man on a mission that day, and he was not going to stop until he absolutely pounding the Cowboys and then lose in the following round. And I don't get it why every single Green Bay Packers quarterback just goes absolutely insane when they play against the Cowboys. Then once again, they would lose in the divisional round in the 2018 season, losing to the Los Angeles Rams 22-30. The Rams were dominant on the ground and rushing for a combined 273 yards between Todd Gurley and CJ Anderson, and it was just absolutely painful seeing these guys carry the ball and absolutely slice the Cowboys defense up to a T. In more recent years, they would lose in the 2021 season as the Cowboys lost in the wild card round to the San Francisco 49ers with a score of 17-23, and this game took place on January 16, 2022, an unfortunate loss. The 2022 season looked promising after they won the wild card game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but then would lose to the San Francisco 49ers once again with a score of 12-19. Finally, the last appearance the Cowboys have made in the playoffs in the 2023 season, Jordan Love unlocked the absolute one for all from Aaron Rodgers and sliced the Cowboys defense, almost scoring 50 points on the Cowboys with a loss of 48-32. And I mean, the Cowboys just could not stop this guy whatsoever. This was the last time the Cowboys have seen the playoffs, and it is just absolutely devastating as a Cowboys fan to constantly see your team go into the playoffs positive, heads high up, filled the roster with talent, and still just not be able to come up top or even make it to a conference game. You start to wonder with all these injuries and all these heartbreaking losses and plays such as Dez, you start to wonder if the Cowboys are genuinely cursed. Well, a story follows as in 1995, all the way back to their last Super Bowl win, it is stated that Jerry Jones actually made a deal with God that said if the Cowboys won Super Bowl 30, he'd never ask to win the Super Bowl again, and they haven't made it past the divisional round since. With this revelating information, some fans believe that this is the reason the Cowboys have not seen any playoff success since their last Super Bowl. Other fans believe that it is actually Jerry Jones' fault, but in a much more different way, as Jerry Jones is known for his hands-on approach as an owner, president, and general manager of the Cowboys. His strategies for building a championship team have been a topic of much discussion among fans and analysts. Some argue that his success, while others believe that his interventions have sometimes hindered the team's ability to achieve sustained greatness. Some fans genuinely believe that Jerry Jones is out of his mind and he isn't what he used to be, and that the ownership should be handed to anybody else that is not him, as they feel as if he is not fit to be running it anymore. But what do you guys believe? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please click like and comment and subscribe for me. This has been Tim Beams, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.